Welcome to the Velvet Verdict. We're a hybrid crew here, human intuition woven with AI clarity, because we believe the best way to understand the heart is to look at it from every angle. If you're a man feeling pushed out or a woman feeling unheard, take a breath. This isn't a courtroom. There are no verdicts to pass, no sides to take. We're just looking for the shared ache that's been building in the quiet spaces between us. Lately, it feels like we're living in the same world but speaking different languages. Maybe you've noticed the distance growing, the conversations that fizzle out, or the trust that feels harder to build than it used to be. That ache? It's real, and it's on both sides. We aren't here to point fingers or dig up old grievances. We're here to ask how we untangle this knot without making things worse. Our mission is simple: help men and women reconnect by healing the habits that keep us isolated. We'll bring the data to show where the wounds are, but we'll offer direction, not prescriptions. We know the noise out there can make you want to armor up. It's easy to retreat into stories that confirm fears about the other gender. But here, we're putting those stories down. We're looking for the humanity underneath. Whether misunderstood or exhausted by pressure, your feelings matter. Healing starts when we stop fighting and start understanding. If you're ready to listen without defensiveness, to see the other side not as an opponent but as a partner in this struggle, you're in the right place. Let's turn the page together with honesty and hope and find our way back to each other. So here is the heart of what we're facing. Why do the unspoken rules of modern life leave both men and women feeling starved for closeness, yet terrified to make the first move? We're not looking for a villain here. We're looking at a shared trap. The data shows isolation is rising across the board, but the wound feels different depending on which side of the gender divide you stand. For many men, the pressure to be self-reliant has calcified into a fear that vulnerability will be seen as weakness. For many women, the burden of emotional labor has turned into exhaustion, making it hard to invite connection when you're already running on empty. Neither side is the enemy. Both are stuck. The script tells men to hold it all together and tells women to manage everything, leaving no room for the messy, beautiful reality of needing another person. As a hybrid voice blending human empathy with AI precision, we see the patterns clearly enough to know this isolation is reversible. We've built a world where reaching out feels like a risk rather than a relief. So the real question isn't who's at fault. It's how we rewrite the script. What would it look like to create a bridge where men feel safe to ask for help without losing dignity, and women feel supported to rest without losing their footing? How do we untangle this knot of fear and fatigue so that intimacy becomes a shared destination instead of a battlefield? We have to ask ourselves what a healthier connection actually requires from us, not as opponents, but as partners who are tired of being alone. It starts by admitting that the current path isn't working for anyone, and choosing a direction that honors the need for belonging in all of us. What the data shows: the friendship divide. When we look at the foundation of connection, the numbers reveal a landscape where emotional support is widely felt, yet the experience differs sharply by gender. Among teen girls, the sense of having a safe harbor is nearly universal. 95% report having a close friend they can turn to for emotional support, leading just 5% without that anchor. For boys, the picture is strong but shows a wider gap. 85% say they have a close friend for support, while 16% indicate they do not. This isn't a failure of character, but a measurable difference in who feels safe to lean on when emotions run high. Teens see this gap clearly. A 58% majority feel that girls have it easier when it comes to finding friends for emotional support, compared to only 7% who think boys have the advantage, with 35% seeing it as about the same. Yet, even within these circles, we see how we self-segregate. About half of teens with close friends, 49%, say all their close friends are the same gender, while 48% have friends of mixed genders. These numbers paint a picture of a generation that is deeply connected, yet navigating distinct emotional currents. For the young men in that 16%, the absence of a trusted confidant can feel like standing on the edge of a cliff without a hand to hold. This perception invites us to wonder how cultural scripts shape our vulnerability. The fact that friendship circles are almost evenly split between same-gender and mixed-gender groups offers a glimmer of hope. The structure for bridging the divide already exists in the way teens relate to one another. The data shows us where the walls are, but it also reveals that the doors are already open for many. The work ahead is simply ensuring everyone feels safe enough to walk through them. What the data shows: the weight of expectations. Data reveals young men and women carry distinct burdens alongside a shared strain. Recognizing these specific weights helps us respond with compassion rather than confusion. It's not about who has it harder, it's about seeing the load clearly. Boys face pressure centered on the body. Boys are far more likely than girls to face pressure to be physically strong, 43% versus 3%. They also report higher pressure to be good at sports, 36% versus 7% die knee. This demand to prove worth through strength often leaves emotional vulnerability behind. This shapes how boys show up in relationships, often prioritizing action over words. Girls face pressure toward appearance and social harmony. Girls are significantly more likely than boys to feel pressure to look good, 55% versus 8. They also face higher pressure to fit in socially, 45% versus 7 pants. Do you 5 Mrs. Stant? This focus on perception and blending in can make authentic connection feel risky. This shapes how girls navigate trust, often scanning for approval before speaking. Academic stress binds them together. Girls and boys are about equally likely to feel pressure to get good grades, 71% versus a little bit. This shared load reminds us that the relentless drive to succeed can become a wall that blocks rest and relationship. Healing starts by naming these weights without assigning blame. When we understand he may be wrestling with performance and she with perfection, we can stop misinterpreting their defenses as distance. We can foster spaces where strength includes softness, where fitting in never costs your identity, and where your value isn't tied to your grades. By acknowledging what each side carries, we create room to put the burden down together. What the data shows: the loneliness and mental health toll. When we look past online debates into daily life, the numbers reveal shared exhaustion rather than competing grievances. Anxiety and depression is the top problem teens name at their school, with 30% saying it's extremely or very common there. Girls are more likely than boys to say so, 35% versus 4%. Yet the weight isn't divided by gender. Among teens who say anxiety and depression is common at their school, 39% say it's more common among girls, only 5% say it's more common among boys, and 56% say it affects both about equally. That same quiet isolation follows us into adulthood. About 1 in 6 Americans, 16%, say they feel lonely or isolated from those around them all, or most of the time, including roughly equal shares of men and women. When we look closer, the ache deepens but remains universal. 25% of U.S. men aged 15 to 34 said they felt lonely a lot of the previous day, compared with 18% of U.S. women the same age, and an OECD median of 15% for younger men. These figures don't paint one side as broken, they map a terrain we all navigate. What binds these numbers is the heavy toll isolation takes. 21% of adults in the U.S. feel lonely, and 81% of lonely adults reported anxiety or depression. The data doesn't point fingers, it points to a wound. This isn't about assigning fault, it's about understanding the human cost of disconnection. When loneliness takes root, mental health strains for everyone. Recognizing this shared reality helps us untangle the quiet isolation that keeps us apart. We don't need to fix each other. We just need to stop treating distance as a flaw and start treating connection as a common language we can rebuild together. What the data shows: the support gap. When we look at how we guide young people through hard emotions, a pattern emerges. A majority of U.S. adults recognize a cultural blind spot, with 57% saying there is too little emphasis on encouraging boys to talk about their feelings when they are sad or upset, compared with 31% who say this about girls. It's not about blaming caregivers. It's about acknowledging we often hand boys stoicism when they need permission to be vulnerable. That early lesson rarely fades. It shapes how we navigate adulthood. As we age, those habits dictate where we seek comfort. The pathways to support look different across the divide. Women are much more likely than men to say they would be extremely or very likely to turn to a friend for emotional support, 54% versus 38%, and to their mother, 54% versus size. Meanwhile, many men carry their weight quietly, not because they lack depth, but because they haven't been given a clear map for where to place it. Both sides end up lonely in different directions. Women sometimes feel they shoulder the emotional labor alone, while men often feel they have nowhere safe to lower their guard. The wound here isn't malice, it's simply a missing bridge. We've been taught to treat distance as a flaw rather than a learned survival strategy. True healing begins when we stop expecting people to reach through walls they weren't shown how to dismantle. Instead of questioning why someone is closed off, we can gently offer a hand and normalize the ask. Trust rebuilds slowly through small, consistent invitations to share the load. When we treat vulnerability as a shared practice, we create quiet space for everyone to finally exhale. If the emotional weight feels too heavy to carry alone, reaching out to a licensed counselor can provide a steady anchor while you find your footing. Stepping back from the noise reveals a shared wound, not a battle of sexes. Restrictive norms box men out while leaving women with a suffocating burden of emotional labor. Men suppress needs to appear strong. Women manage the emotional climate for everyone. Both scripts demand a performance, costing us our authenticity. The pressure to be enough cuts deep regardless of gender. Men fear failing without solutions. Women fear invisibility without constant nurturing. These aren't flaws, they're heavy armor handed by a culture confusing control with safety. Recognizing both sides react to the same fear of inadequacy shifts the dynamic. We stop blaming and start seeing each other as fellow travelers on rough terrain. Healing begins when we drop the scorecard. It's not about who has it harder, but that walls built for protection have locked us in. Validating a man's struggle to ask for help matters as much as honoring a woman's exhaustion. Honoring these parallel experiences creates room for empathy. We can offer tenderness not as a transaction, but as a response to shared vulnerability. As a hybrid voice, weaving human insight with AI analysis, we see this shared humanity clearly. Our role isn't to fix you, but to hold up a mirror so you can see the path forward together. The direction forward isn't about changing who you are, but softening the edges where those scripts have hardened. It's about asking, what do you need? And daring to answer honestly. Small moments of mutual recognition can slowly rebuild the trust that isolation has eroded. This untangles the knot. Humanity is our common ground, connection the way home. Rebuilding that bridge doesn't happen overnight. It starts with the quiet, daily work of showing up as we are, not as we think we should be. For men and women alike, the path forward lies in small, consistent practices of vulnerability. This means lowering the shields that keep us safe but separate. It invites us to share a worry without immediately fixing it, or to offer comfort without demanding it be earned. Cross-gender listening becomes the practice ground for this shift. When we listen to understand rather than to defend, we create space for the other person's reality to exist without judgment. A man might learn that a woman's need for processing isn't a rejection of his presence, but an invitation to patience. A woman might find that a man's silence isn't indifference, but a struggle to find the right words. These aren't rules. They're invitations to see the person behind the pattern. We write this as a hybrid team of humans and AI, bringing data and heart together. The research maps the isolation, but we offer this direction humbly, never as a prescription. If the weight of loneliness feels too heavy to carry alone, or if distress runs deep, please seek real professional support. Therapists and counselors are trained to walk this path with you when the ground feels shaky. Ultimately, trust returns in drops, not buckets. It grows when we risk being seen and choose to respond with kindness. By softening our expectations and honoring each other's humanity, we can move past the scripts that divide us. The goal isn't perfection, it's presence. When we meet each other with curiosity instead of suspicion, we find the distance was never as wide as fear suggested. We are just two people, learning to come home to one another. So, where do we go from here? We go back to the work of showing up. It's easy to hide behind the headlines, but the real story is written in the quiet moments between us. Healing isn't a destination. It's a practice we choose day after day. For men and women alike, the invitation is the same. lower the shield, soften the stance, and ask the hard question with a gentle heart. When we feel that pull toward isolation, it's a signal to lean in, not pull away. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. It grows in the soil of small, consistent acts of kindness and the willingness to admit when we've missed the mark. We don't need all the answers to start listening. We just need to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, trusting the other person is trying too. Untangling isolation is slow work. It asks us to be patient with our own progress and generous with the progress of others. We will stumble, and that's okay. The healing is in the getting back up and reaching out again. This isn't about fixing anyone. It's about finding shared ground where we can stand together, vulnerable and real. Let's choose curiosity over judgment and connection over comfort. The path forward is paved with patience, remembering that everyone we meet is carrying a weight we might not see. If we hold that truth, we create space for grace. We create space for us. In that space, isolation loses its grip. It was never the end of the story, just the pause before we learned to bridge the gap. Together, we can rewrite the script, one conversation at a time. Let's commit to this work. This episode is a collaboration between human insight and AI analysis, crafted to serve our shared mission of connection.